Hi everyone, my name is Memo. This is my channel Houseplanty Goodness, and essentially this is the place where I like to geek out about my big passion, which you might be able to see behind me, is tropical houseplants. So if you do like this video, please do consider dropping a like down below. It does let me know that you like this type of content, and I should potentially be creating more content like this. And if you're really kind of getting into your houseplants at the moment and you want to see more content like this, do consider subscribing as well down below, because I try to bring out content like this about 2 to 3 times a week. So let's dive into today's topic, which you might be able to see a bit of a hint in front of me. This is my Hoya Crinkle 8, and I'll bring it in a bit closer and hopefully you'll be able to see why it's called Crinkle 8. And you can see those little dimples, they're like inverse abs, I call them, on each one of the leaves. And there's 8 of them, generally speaking. There's not always going to be 8. There might be 6, there might be 7, there might be 4. It depends on the leaf and depends on how juvenile the plant is. But the one thing that the topic that I want to talk about today a bit more isn't specifically about this Hoya. And I've got a errant little vining stem there. But I don't want to talk about this specific Hoya. I want to talk about blooming in Hoyas and what I've found has worked well in my situation in terms of promoting kind of heavy blooming on some of my Hoyas. And what I always say about this one is it's very much like a mullet. So it is business in the front and party in the back. So you might be able to see, if I bring it in a bit closer again there, you might be able to see at the moment it's got one peduncle that's in bloom. There's a few more that are coming in. And I don't know whether or not you'll be able to see some of the other ones, but if I just quickly count the peduncles that are on this plant, there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, I think in total. And what I might do is I'll see if it will kind of come across if I bring this a bit closer. This is the jankiest video ever that I've made, but you might be able to see there some of the peduncles, and you can see one right there as well. The point I'm trying to make with this is, if you've got a growing vining stem and you think it looks a bit too much, or if you don't like the look of it, don't cut it off, because that's where the new foliage is going to come from. And if you cut it off, it's going to mean that the plant's going to have to work that much harder to bring out a new vining stem to grow more leaves. And as you know, most Hoyas are quite slow growing. So don't do that. But also you'll get some vining stems with absolutely no leaves growing peduncles. And actually this produced a lot of blooms from those same stems that even last year did not have foliage on it, but it produced quite a bit of it's called flowers, or peduncles essentially. So umbels of flowers, I think that's what they're called. I might be wrong, but I think that's what it is. And talking about blooming in Hoya, and you've never had a Hoya bloom for you previously, you might not know this, you might do already, but they do. Some of them have got scent, some of them have got stronger scents than others. This one is a bit grandma-esque, so it's a very strong floral aroma. But with most Hoyas, their scent comes out in the evening time or in the morning time, and that is, I think at least, if it's anything like some garden plants. So for instance, I'm thinking of the honeysuckle now. The honeysuckle is a plant that you have in the garden, and it tends to be fragrant at nighttime or in the morning. And if I remember correctly when I was reading, the reason for that is because it's pollinators. What pollinates the honeysuckle, and potentially the same kind of pollinators might be for Hoyas, are moths. So because a moth is more active in the morning hours or in the evening hours, these types of plants will be more fragrant during those times of day to get those pollinators interested in their flowers so they can pollinate as well. So this is entirely what I think it might be. I haven't done any research, but if it aligns with what other plants do it, I would assume that's pretty much the reason. Now, let me bring up another Hoya so you can see another Hoya that has got quite a few peduncles on it, and I'll talk about what I've done in my care in order to promote such a huge amount of peduncles on what is relatively small plants, basically. This plant, for instance, I've only had for about 2.5 years. It only started producing peduncles last year, and it went from 1 or 2 peduncles in the beginning, and I think half of the peduncles that I've got on now I've had since last year. So that's another thing. Do not cut out the kind of peduncles where the little umbels of flowers pop out from, because that's where future flowers will also be coming from. So just bear that in mind. So let me pick up the next one and I'll show you the other one as well. So in front of me, you might be able to see the second Hoya that I've got that is in heavy bloom at the moment. This is my Hoya obovata variegata, so it's the variegated Hoya obovata. Hopefully that is focusing on the plant and not on me. And then you might be able to see some of the peduncles that are very, 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 sorry about all the shaking, I'm trying to hold it steady, but you can see some of the peduncles that are very heavily laden and they're about to come out. So you can maybe able to see some of the other peduncles here as well. Let's give a quick count. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and there's a tiny one at the very top, 16, 17. So very much a prolific bloomer. This is slightly different than the Crinkle 8. The Crinkle 8's flowers will stick around for, I'd say, about a week or two. This one will usually, each flower blossom essentially, or each one of the umbels will probably only be around for about 4 or 5 days, and they will drop their blooms after that point. Now, I think with this one, it's not one that has a very strong scent. I've not been able to smell anything from it, or if it is, it's very, very delicate. The Crinkle 8 is much more strong smelling, if that makes sense. But this is definitely one that will flower quite readily, essentially. Now, let's talk about what I do in my care and what might be contributing to their abundance in blooming. As with most of my Hoya, I've got them in my aroid soil mix. So the ingredients to that, or how I mix it, is on my channel as well. So if you want to know a bit more, check that out. And with all of my Hoyas, bar none, they will always be as close as I possibly can get them to a south-facing window. What this does mean is that the foliage does get a bit washed out. It does get a bit bleached out because it's quite strong light. But it also means that they will bloom in abundance. The other thing that you might be able to see is my janky kind of support sticks. I grow all my Hoyas upright, with the exception of literally the pollination and the Hoya linearis, which I'm looking at the front of me, because they are very much, if you see them in nature, they are ones that will hang down. And that's what they do in nature. But with a lot of the other Hoyas, generally speaking, even though they're vining, they vine up trees rather than being trailing. So what I find is if I give them that support upwards, they will grow more foliage, and they will also have be very giving essentially with peduncles. Obviously don't cut the peduncles like we talked about earlier on. And as soon as I start seeing the peduncles coming up and kind of swelling up, or getting those little flower blossoms starting to kind of emerge from the peduncle itself, what I will then start doing is fertilizing a bit more frequently. So maybe every second watering with a liquid fertilizer. My preferred one is liquid gold leaf. But if you don't have that in your region, or if you haven't tried it and you've got something else, try something with a high phosphorus, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's phosphorus that you need. If not, I'll kind of put a comment somewhere here, which is, it kind of encourages blooms essentially within most plants. So I think that's everything I wanted to say about these Hoyas, none of which are actually, by the way, in my conservatory / hothouse. So it's not really high humidity. They're in regular household humidities. As I said, getting baked by the sun most of the time. Most of them are over radiated as well, but they seem to be doing really, really well. So I've got a couple of Hoyas, again, the linearis and the fishtail Hoya, the pollination. I'm looking at them in front of me. They're in the conservatory because they generally are slightly more delicate. The leaves are thinner. These are quite succulent, the same way as the Crinkle 8, so I just have them outside, out and about in the house. No problem at all. So yeah, I think that's everything I wanted to say about these Hoyas and about what I have done that might be what's causing this many peduncles to grow on essentially my Hoyas. If you've got any questions, comments, drop them down below. I'd love to have a conversation with you guys. Hopefully you've enjoyed. Hopefully I shall see you here soon, and hopefully you have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Bye.